Hello guys, welcome to Nandi. Please like, share, comment and subscribe to our channel. Let's get started. Let's discuss the first topic, that is EC Election Commission has vast powers to act against criminalization of politics. Okay, here there are two topics are in news, that is Election Commission and number two, criminalization of politics. This criminalization of politics is very significant from the mains point of view, by the way, right? And election commission is also very significant from preliminary plus mains point of view as a part of GS2. Okay, so here what this article is referring about, this article is talking about a webinar, okay, webinar organized by Association for Democratic Reform. So in that webinar, the former judge of Supreme Court Madan B. Lokar, while referring to the Supreme Court's February 2020 judgment, okay, Supreme Court has given a judgment in 2020 February directing the political parties on publishing criminal antecedents of candidates. In order to prevent this criminalization of politics, Supreme Court has directed all the political parties to publish the criminal background of all the contestants of their particular political parties. So in that context, it said that Election Commission could do more to stop the criminalization of politics by complying the directions of Supreme Court here. So in order to go into the detail, let's try to understand why Supreme Court had to give such kind of a judgment. Okay, let's look at the data here. Here, cause of concern, right? Before discussing the 2020 judgment, let's see the alarming increase of MPs with criminal cases. In 2004, MPs with pending criminal cases were only 24%, and in 2009 it increased to 34%, more than 6% here, and 2014 it is almost 34%, 4% increase, and in 2019 if you look at that you will be surprised, that is almost 43% of MPs, member of parliaments, are having a pending criminal cases. Here you can easily see that here I mentioned here comparison with 2014 and 2019 here. So this is the diagram related to 2020. Okay, how it's increased. And here, and if you look at the cases will range from a rape case to murder case, kidnapping, crimes against women. So these are the serious cases against these MPs, and candidates having such kind of cases are becoming a member of parliamenters. Okay, so taking this situation under consideration, Supreme Court has issued a slew of suggestions for the political parties, okay, by saying that the political parties must publish the entire criminal history of their candidates for Assembly and Lok Sabha elections. For both Assembly election candidates and Lok Sabha election candidates, also the concerned political parties must publish the criminal history. So what kind of a criminal history? Along with the criminal history, it includes nature of their offences, charges framed against them, what are the charges, and court concerned, and case number also. It must include all this data, and along with that, that particular criminal information of that particular candidate must be published in the local newspaper, at the same time national newspaper, and political parties social media handles as well. They have to publish it 3 levels: local newspaper, national newspaper, and political parties social media accounts also. Like they have Google account, Facebooks, Twitters, and everything. They have to publish the history, criminal or history or data regarding their particular candidates, and at the same time the information is mandatory to be published either within 48 hours, within 2 days of the selection of candidates, or less than 2 weeks before the first date of filing nominations. Okay, within 48 hours to before 1 week of the filing of nominations also. And the political parties need to submit compliance report. This is important regarding all these things, whether they are followed all these rules or not, to publish the criminal history, at the same time to publish on their local newspaper, national newspaper, and their social media handles. Okay, so in order to complete, whether they complete or not, they have to give a compliance report to whom? Election Commission of India, ECI, within how many time? Within 72 hours. Okay, within 72 hours they have to give a compliance report to Election Commission of India. In case, what will happen if they fail to submit the compliance report to Election Commission of India? What will happen here? EC, in case of non-compliance by political parties concerned to the notice of Supreme Court, it can bring it to it can take it to the notice of Supreme Court. EC, Election Commission, can take it to the notice of Supreme Court, and Supreme Court will consider it as a contempt of court. Contempt of court. You know that, right? Contempt of court is a non-bailable offense, and anybody if refuses or denies Supreme Court order will be considered as contempt of court, saying no to the Supreme Court or non-compliance of Supreme Court order or judgment, right? So because of this, even the Supreme Court has given this judgment. Why? And they have to give one more thing, right? In 2020 judgment, it has said no political party officer offers an explanation. What? No political party offers an explanation as to why candidates with pending criminal cases selected as candidates. Why candidates with criminal background have been selected as candidates? Why? What is the need? Money power? Muscle power? What is it? What is the reason behind selecting those candidates who are having a criminal background? It also posed a question also, and under this judgment, political parties have to give a reason why that particular candidate has been selected as a candidate. Okay, they have to give the reason also why that candidate. Why? They have to give an explanation. Otherwise, they have to complete. In case of non-comply, they'll face the contempt of court charges. Okay, and at the same time, even in the 2018 also, a bench of constitutional bench has given a judgment. In that, it has mentioned that rapid criminalization of politics cannot be arrested by merely disqualifying tainted legislatures, but should begin by cleansing political parties. By cleansing political parties, merely disqualifying the candidate, particular candidate, will not help eliminating the criminalization of politics or cleansing the criminalized politics. That must begin by cleansing the political parties itself. Okay, so that's why, because of this particular article is very significant for your mains point of view, criminalization of politics. Okay, so, and what is this? By the way, this data is be given by ADR, that is Association for Democratic Reforms. What is this? This is a non-partisan, non-governmental organization which works in the area of electoral and political reforms. Okay, and it also aims at bringing transparency and accountability in Indian politics and reducing the influence of money and muscle power in the election. So this is the ADR. Okay, so this is the report is given by ADR. Okay, because of this, by concerned by this new trend in the elections, that is alarming increase of candidates with criminal backgrounds in the elections at the assembly level and parliamentary level, Supreme Court has delivered a judgment in 2020 with these suggestions. Okay, so if anybody doesn't comply with this, election commissioner under the article 324 can bring it to the notice of Supreme Court. Let's know about Election Commission of India. Okay, so Justice Locker also referred to Article 324, right? Okay, so what is this Article 324, by the way? Article 324 provides election commission to superintendents direct and control the electoral rolls. Okay, admitting the new new voters, or updating the voters. Okay, it includes updating voters. Whoever finishes 18 years will get the voting right. Okay, so it updating, basically update, not only updates, it's superintendents, it controls, and it direction also, it gives directions to it also. At the same time, it provides for the conduction of elections by the election commission to parliament, state legislative assemblies, and offices of president plus vice president. Basically, Election Commission of India conducts elections to parliament, state legislatures, and offices of president and vice president according to this Article 324. And it was established in accordance with the Constitution on 25th January 1950. So therefore, we celebrate January 25th as a National Voters Day. Remember this? We celebrate January 25th as National Voters Day. This is important from your preliminary background, by the way, for especially TSPSC or APPSCs. Okay, and if you look at the composition, let's look at the composition of Election Commission of India. It is consist of Chief Election Commissioner plus 2 election commissioners. This number may be increased by president. If president wants to increase that, he may increase. Okay, he may fix from time to time, or increasing or decrease, he may fix it from time to time. Okay, and these appointments are done by president. Who appoints them? President appoints the chief election commissioner and election commissioner also. When, in order to appoint an election commissioner, the panel will be headed by the chief election commissioner. Here, whenever there is a need to appoint an election commissioner, that particular committee or panel will be headed by the chief election commissioner. Even president also appoints regional commissioners, right? After consulting with the election commissioner. Okay, if it necessary, appoints regional commissioners after consulting the election commissioner. Okay, and one more thing, if you look at the CEC, that is chief election commissioner versus election commissioners, they are equal when it comes to powers and functions. Both are equal. There is no inferior and superior. Okay, there is no superior, they are both are equal powers, and all matters, how the decisions have been reached here, all the matters are decided by majority amongst members. Among 3, at least 2 people has to say yes. 3, right? So majority means 2. Okay, so they reach decisions by the majority. It doesn't mean if CEC says no, or if both election commissioners say yes, the decision will prevail. Okay, even if election commission of India says no to it, because the decision will be arrived by majority amongst the members. The election commissioner and the 2 election commissioners receive equal salary, and they start not only power, they are not only equal regarding the powers and functions, they have also equal salary, allowances, and other benefits also. Okay, when it comes to tenure, they'll hold office for 6 years or till they attain 65 years, whichever is earlier. 6 years to 65, whichever is earlier. Okay, and removal, they can resign anytime, by the way. They can resign anytime or can also be removed from before expiry of their term. Okay, the election commissioner can be removed from his office in the same manner and on the same grounds as judge of Supreme Court. Okay, so limitations. What are the limitations here? The Constitution has not prescribed the qualifications. Please, this point is very, very important. If you look at the qualifications of a Supreme Court judge or High Court judge, the qualifications have been mentioned. President, Vice President qualifications are mentioned. But here, for election, for being an election commissioner of India, there is no qualifications prescribed by the Constitution. Constitution doesn't mention any qualification for election commissioner. Okay, and the Constitution has not debarred, right? Constitution has not debarred the retiring election commissioners from any further appointment by the government. That means what? Even after retirement, they can hold a government offices. They are not debarred from appointment. They can be appointed by the government after retirement also. There is no post-retirement jobs. Yes, for post-retirement, they can do post-retirement job also. Okay, the Constitution hasn't debarred. The Constitution didn't debar them. Okay, so these points are very, very crucial for your preliminary plus mains point of view, and especially for mains point of view, criminalization of politicization is very, very important. Okay. Next article, Myanmar military charges Suu Kyi with corruption. Right? As you know that recently the Myanmar military has grabbed power in a coup. Right? What is coup? Coup means it's a sudden, violent and illegal seizure of power from a government. It means illegal capturing power from an elected government illegally occupying power from a particular government. We call it as a military junta. Military junta, okay, or military coup. Okay, so this is not the first time in Myanmar. By the way, this is the third time ever since it got independence from Britishers in 1945. By the way, this is the third time, and after military coup, the military declared 1-year state of emergency. Okay, so, and they also detained democratically elected Aung San Suu Kyi, and because of that there were so many protests, democratic protest against military junta, and in that protest almost 1,000 protesters have been killed by military rule. Okay, so this is the background of this article. Also, this article is talking about that now they are convicted. At that time, they alleged that Aung San Suu Kyi was indulged in corruption and has taken bribes and misused the authority. These were the charges. Now they are charged Aung San Suu Kyi, okay, by these following charges. Let's see, look at some of the background which is necessary for our UPSC. Let's see how this particular topic is significant from Indian perspective. Here we can easily see that Myanmar shares almost 1,643 kilometer long boundary with India, and it shares the boundary with 4 of our Indian states, that is Mizoram, Manipur, Nagaland, Arunachal Pradesh. 4 states. This is very, very important. Please remember these states, be it UPSC or state PSCs, they ask this kind of questions. Okay. So Myanmar, and one more thing is very crucial, that is Myanmar is the only Asian country, right? Only Asian country to share physical boundary with India, right? Myanmar is the only country to share physical boundary with India, and that's why it is we call it as a gateway, right? Gateway to the East and Asian countries. So that's why it is also crucial for our Act East policy, Act East policy plus Neighborhood First policy. Act East policy, what is the motive of Act East policy? Act East policy's motive is to integrate, right? Integrate and engage with ASEAN countries. 10 ASEAN countries in order to develop, right, for economic and cultural strategic development, right? At the same time, it will help our northeastern states to grow. Okay, that's why for these policies of our Indian foreign policy, Myanmar plays a crucial role in order to get the Act East policy success. The role of Myanmar is very significant for India, and that's why India invested in several infrastructural and connectivity projects like India Myanmar Thailand trilateral highway, right? At the same time, Kaladan multi-modal transit transport. This is very, very, very important from your examination point of view. By the way, this Kaladan multi-modal transit transport project links Calcutta to Sittwe in Myanmar and Myanmar's Kaladan river to India's northeast. Okay, it is a river, ocean plus river plus land road. Okay, and it connects here. It connects, starts from here, Calcutta to, and it connects our Myanmar, right? So in case, because in order to enter into northeast, we have to enter from here, Chicken Neck, right? If something happens to the Chicken Neck, the entire northeast will be cut off from India. So that's why it's one more alternative, right? Calcutta to Sittwe, Sittwe to Kaladan River. Via Kaladan River, we can enter into Indian northeastern region. So it also reduces the distance and time. Okay, it saves our time and it saves our money also. Okay, it is almost more than 1,000 kilometers of journey. Okay, so in the same time, we even India signed land border crossing agreements in 2018, right, which allowed bona fide travelers with valid documents to cross the border at two international points. What are they? More Tamu, right, and Jokawatar Ri. These are the two land border crossing agreements, land border crossing areas. And this is also significant from the point of view of insurgents also. Most of Naga insurgents, especially Naga insurgency, by attacking in India, insurgents of Nagas take place in here. Let me see. They sometimes Naga insurgents attack India and they go to Myanmar and they take shelter here in these states. And again they come back and they attack and they just go back. And especially this Myanmar military is pro-China. Because in the earlier government also because India also always supports a democratic government, isn't it? Being a largest democracy in the world, it supports democratic government. That's why it supported Aung San Suu Kyi, right? So India doesn't support military governments, but now because of its strategic interest in order to counter China, now India is also trying to establish a dialogue with military rule also. Okay, that's why from security perspective, from infrastructure and connectivity perspective, right, and Act East policy plus neighborhood past policy perspectives, Myanmar is very crucial for India. And instability or political instability in Myanmar means a threat to India's territory also. You know that because of this violence, political instability, so many people from Myanmar is trying to cross the Indian border, Myanmar border, and they're trying to enter into India also. Okay, refugees. Already you have heard about Rohingyas, right? Rohingya crisis, right? So Myanmar is in news for all the bad reasons, by the way. So these facts are very, very important. Please try to remember this for any examination, UPSC or state PSCs. It's very, very, very crucial. Talk about the next topic. Biden-Johnson, right? Biden-Johnson seeks to sign New Atlantic Charter. What is this New Atlantic Charter? But before that, let's see what is Atlantic Charter, right? Atlantic Charter was signed during the Second World War in August 1941 between British Prime Minister, the then British Prime Minister Winston Churchill, and the then US President Franklin D. Roosevelt during the Second World War in 1941. Right? What are the features of that declaration, Atlantic Charter, by the way? Right? So they set out through this Atlantic Charter, they set out certain common goals for world after post Second World War. How? Okay, they've set out certain common goals for the world after Second World War. What are these goals, by the way? Free trade, disarmament, right to self-determination of all people, right? And so this document was often called as a transatlantic special relationship. It's a cornerstone for, it is considered as a cornerstone of transatlantic special friendship between Britain and US, and it also considered as a foundation for United Nations and NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Okay, so that is the significance of this Atlantic Charter. So now the Biden and Johnson, again, they want to sign a new, that is Atlantic Charter 2.0. Okay, so what does it consist of? What is it about? It is about defending the principles, values and institutions of democracy and open societies. You know that, right? Now these days democratic institutions are facing a trouble, facing a crisis, whether it is because of China and now Myanmar. They are everywhere several democratic protests, pro-democracy protests. For example, Hong Kong, okay, Hong Kong, Taiwan, okay, Malaysia, the current after the military coup, okay, Malaysian, almost 1,000 people have been killed by the military, right, during the pro-democracy protest in Myanmar. So because of this, these two leaders, these two countries want to strengthen the democratic principles and values in the contemporary world and to promote the open societies, right, liberal democratic values. So that's why this new Atlantic Treaty Charter is very significant for your preliminary plus mains point of view also. Okay, so please pay attention to it. Let's see next topic. Nagaland to form a panel on Naga issue, right? And a Naga government has decided to institute a committee comprising of opposition leaders to pursue the lingering Naga peace agreement. Naga peace agreement is in news, by the way. This is important from your mains perspective and preliminary perspective also, and at the same time they're going to discuss about the Naga political issues also, right? Let's see what is this Naga peace agreement, right, and what are the Naga political issues, right? So let's look at the history of Naga insurgency or Nagas. Okay, so before pre-independence, this Naga Assam, along with Assam, Naga Hills was part of the British India. Okay, so in 1946, Naga National Council was formed, and in 1947, August 14, they declared Nagaland as an independent state. So being a part of India, they declared Naga Hills as a independent state. Okay. So after that, in 1952, they formed a underground Naga federal government. They formed a underground Naga federal government and Naga federal army in order to protect their independency, right? In order to tackle that, in order to suppress the insurgency, India sent army to deal with the insurgency, and in 1958 it also imposed AFSPA, that is Armed Forces Special Powers Act. Okay, This is important for your preliminary point of view. And the Naga Hills, a district of, and was declared as a state, Nagaland state in 1963. After taking action, right, it was declared as a state in 1963. Okay, on November 11th, 1975, in order to pacify these insurgents, government got a section of MNC leaders, right? MNC leaders, that is MNC leaders, the Shillong Accord, right? They signed a Shillong Accord between NNC and Indian government. So what is this agreement is about? This agreement is about to give up the arms, right? To give up the arms. A group of one party, but at that time, the group of one party members led by Muwa, who were at the time in China, refused to accept the Shillong Accord and formed a National Socialist Council of Nagaland in 1980. So some section of people were agreed to maintain peace with India and give up the arms according to this by signing this Shillong Accord, but one fraction of NNC was disagreed or refused to accept this Shillong Accord, and they continued to fight for Greater Naga land. Greater Naga land. Okay. So even after that, in 1988, the NSCN split into two groups as NCCN IM and NSCN Kapalang groups. Okay, these are the major groups right now which are doing all the insurgents activities. IM, right? And Indian government in 2015 signed a treaty ceasefire agreement with NSCN IM in order to maintain peace, right? But now this peace accord is in trouble right now. But what are the demand of this NSCN? The demands of they are demanding a Greater Naga limb, right? What is this Greater Naga limb? Greater Naga limb comprises of all contiguous Naga inhabited areas along with Nagaland, and that includes district of Assam, Arunachal Pradesh, Manipur, and also a large tract of Myanmar. So along with this, all these regions, they want a Greater Naga limb or Naga land, right? But it's how is it possible when the one of the large portion of Nagaland is in Myanmar right now? Will they give it? No, of course, obviously no. It's a issue of international issue now. Okay, so even the Naga Assembly has endorsed the Greater Nagaland issue by passing it in 5 times in the Assembly, right? In this 64, 70, 94, 2003 and 2015 also. So in order to tackle that, Indian government signed an agreement. As I told you, now that agreement, what is that agreement? Agreement is about ceasefire agreement and to give up the arms and stop the insurgency activities with NSCN, right? IM. Okay, even 2005 also we signed that. It was termed as a historic agreement between Indian government and versus NSCN IM, right? They've agreed to ceasefire. Okay, but there are some certain problems with this peace accord. What is the problems? Now, according to that accord, earlier the NSCN was declared as a militant organization. Now they de-recognized as the militant organization, and talks have been established. Okay, and Government of India has opened a discussion regarding the Naga territorial issue, that is Greater Nagaland, within the existing boundaries of neighboring states, that is Manipur, Assam and Arunachal Pradesh. Okay, and regarding the AFSPA and democratic change due to the cross-border migration from Myanmar and other areas, and tribal like Meitei issue also. Okay, so Meiteis that are diluting the local population, Meiteis who are like outsiders, their belief is that Nagas, they are diluting the culture of Nagas because of this Meiteis. So they discussed all these issues, but now the issues are getting deteriorated because of the actions of governor of the Nagaland's interference in the political issues of Naga politics. Okay, so that is the reason this issue is in news again. So that's why they're trying to pacify it issues between the NSCN, IM, and the Naga government, and they're trying to strike a balance. They're trying to strike a ceasefire agreement, right? Peaceful ceasefire agreement between India and NSCN. And if you see the previous slides map, you will understand the demand of the greater Nagaland portions. Okay, so please have a look at that.